Okay, we're getting ready to start Chapter 3, and Chapter 3 is all about decimals. Today we're going to describe the relationship between two decimal place value positions. Can anybody tell me what the place value positions are after the decimal, to the right of the decimal? What's the first one? Say that. No, the second one is hundredths. The first one is tenths. You got to be sure you get that th on the end of it. And so it's tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay? Here we go. It says if 1/100th is divided into 10 equal parts, each part is 1,000. Use the model to show tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Divide the square into 10 equal columns or rectangles. Shade one rectangle. What part of the whole is the shaded rectangle? Write that part as a decimal fraction. So you're going to take your ruler and you're going to lay it on the square. So you need to take your ruler and you need to lay it against those marks evenly, and you need to take your pencil and draw down the edge of your ruler. I'm going to attempt to do this with just a straight line on here because of my, okay. And you need to do that all across your paper. So stop only across your paper for now. Okay, so go ahead and stop your. We've divided our large square into how many rectangles? 10. Now it says shade one of the rectangles. So go ahead and take your colored pencils and shade one of the rectangles. Now the question is, what part of a whole is the shaded rectangle? Write that part as a decimal and a fraction. What will my decimal look like? A 0.1. And what place value is that one in? The tenth. Why are we putting that in the tenth? Because we divided that rectangle into how many parts? And we shaded one of those. What will it look like as a fraction? 1/10. 1/10. Okay? Let's look what this wants. Now we're supposed to divide each rectangle into 10 equal squares. Okay? So we're going to now go this way across our paper. And when we get done, we'll have 10 little squares in each of those rectangles. So go ahead and do that. And you'll do that by turning your ruler the other way and drawing your line. And you'll move your ruler down and draw your other line until you get all those points on the side connected. All right, so it says divide each rectangle into 10 equal squares, so it should look like that. Use a second color to shade one of the squares. What part of a whole is shaded? Okay, let's shade this little square down here. If you've already shaded something else, that's okay too, but let's shade this little square. How much of it, the rectangle or the square, is that? 100. So if I'm going to write that as a decimal, what is that going to look like? 0 and 100th, or 0 point. We don't have any tenths, but we have 100th. You get in the habit of saying that first part. Hundredths, tenths, thousandths. Okay, and we're supposed to write that as a fraction also. What will that look like? 1 over 100. Now we're going to divide this. They've taken this little square and they've enlarged it. Sometimes people do this on maps. If you're in a city and you want to see a certain spot, you'll go over there and there's an enlarged piece. So they've taken that little square that's 100 and they've enlarged it, and it says, divide the enlarged 100th square into 10 equal columns of rectangles. So you're going to do that same thing you did. Take your ruler and lay it on there, and you're going to not do that. You're going to divide this into 10 equal parts, like this. So go ahead and work on that. Okay, it says divide the enlarged 100th square into 10 equal columns, which we did. And then it says to use a different color and shade that. Okay, I'm having a little trouble getting a different color, so mine's all blue, but you can use a different color. Come down here and shade one of those columns. One of those columns shaded. No, you can use a different color. Quickly, it doesn't matter what color. How many parts of the model will the model have? So if I did this to every one of these little squares, how many parts would my model have? $1,000 parts. Every one of these little squares would be 10 parts. And how many of those squares do we have? 100 times 10. What do we know when we multiply by something with zeros? We can take that 0 from the 10 and add it to our 100 and get 1,000. Okay, let's see what the next thing is. Use a third color to shade one rectangle. Oh, we did that. To shade one rectangle of the enlarged 100th square, what part of the square is the shaded rectangle? So if we were going to write this shaded part as a decimal, what would that look like? We have no ones, right? We haven't filled this whole block with color. And when we shaded this down here, we got to put our decimal. We didn't shade any tenths or hundredths, but we shaded 1,000th. And if I were going to write that as a fraction, it would look like 1 over 1,000. Explain what each shaded part of your model in the investigation section shows. What fraction can you write that relates each shaded part to the next greater shaded part? So let's go back to our model. What part was this? What part was this right here? 1/10. And what part was this? 100th. And this was 1,000th. Okay, so let's go back to our sheet of paper. So we can write the model shows 1/10, 100th, and 1,000th shaded, and then we're going to come back and talk about. So the model shows 1/10, 100th, and 1,000th shaded. Each shaded part is 1/10 of the next larger shaded part. So let's go back to our drawing and talk about that. What it means. Each shaded part is 1/10 of the next larger shaded part. So if we are here at 1/10, and we go to 100th, 100th is 1/10 of 1/10. If we go down to our little bar down here, it is 1/10 of 100th. So each time you break it down smaller, it's 1/10 of the part, just larger than that. Okay, the next question is identify and describe a part of your model that shows 1/1000th. Okay, so identify and describe a part of your model that shows 1/1000th. Explain how you know. One shaded rectangle of 100th that is divided into 10 equal rectangles shows 1/1000th. So one shaded rectangle, that's this, of 100th is this. Whoops. Shows 1/1000th. If each 100th was divided into 10 equal parts, I would have 10 times 100 or 1,000 parts. So when we divided this rectangle into tenths, if I would do that to all the rectangles on this square, then each 100th would be divided into tenths, and I would have 1,000 parts within my beginning square. You can use your understanding of place value patterns and place value chart to write decimals that are 10 times as much or 1/10 of a given decimal. So if I have 400ths, what is 10 times as much as 400? So if I multiplied 400ths times 10, what would I get? Not 40. For what? 4/10. Okay, and if I divided it or multiplied it by 1/10, I would get 4,000ths. So if I have 300ths, and I want 10 times as much as that, I'm going to go back to my tenths. So I would have, and if I wanted 1/10 of this, if I have 1/10 and I want 10 times as much, what is 10 times 1/10? 1 whole. If I have 10 dimes, I have a whole dollar. 1/10 of 1/10 is 100. And 7,000ths, 10 times as much is going to be, 7/10, and 1/10 of it is going to be 7,000. Okay, here we go. This is on the Sharon Show. Nothing is full, so I don't have a whole number, so I'm going to put a 0. How many tenths columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the hundredths, and 1, 2, 3, 4,